Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of Japanese video game pickups. Yes, I went to Japan throughout most of November. It was a really strange trip because I know not everybody cares and you just want to see the pickups. So if you just want to see the pickups, you can skip to this time. But basically, I had the opportunity to go there, and I was there for a few specific dates. Like I have my beginning date of arrival and the departure from Japan were set, but most of the time in between was kind of my time to do whatever I wanted. And so that was cool because the first leg of it, the first thing I had to do was be down in Kyoto for Magic Kyoto, which is a convention, and I've already talked about it, but it was Shenmue 3 related stuff. And I went to that, and then I decided to stay in the Kyoto area, or Kansai area, which consists of Kyoto, Osaka, and Kobe. I've never been to Kobe, but you know, I went to Osaka as well. And I decided to, as I usually do, pick up a bunch of video game stuff. And then after that, a buddy of mine who was stationed, he lives in South Korea, but his name is Fox, I've mentioned him many times. He was down in Guam for work, and he's like, hey man, if you're already in my region, I'll fly you down to Guam, you can stay with me for a while and just stay for a week and have a vacation. I was like, yes, that sounds awesome. So I totally did that. So Guam is awesome. If you've never had the chance to go there, if you're ever thinking about it, like, everybody has this romanticized idea of Hawaii, but Hawaii's not really like that. Guam is like that. It's amazing. I love it down there. It's like, you wouldn't expect it coming from me, but it's like the place where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to get in the water and I'm just going to chill on the beach all day. Like it's a different me, but it's awesome. I love being there for that reason. But anyway, so I got to do that and then went back up to Japan, and in that trip I stayed in Yokohama, which is around the Tokyo Bay area. So a lot of stuff to pick up, a lot of time to pick stuff up, because most of the time was my own. Like I said, I only had specific dates and specific things I had to be there for. But diminishing returns. As you can see, there's everything on this table, a lot of cool stuff, and there's some stuff off this table that you will see towards the end of the video. But you know, like I was actually just in Japan back in September, and I had done a whole bunch of shopping at stores like Hard Off and Book Off, which I've talked about many times in that area, and I kind of figured, they're probably not going to have changed that much in a little over a month. So that was part of my reasoning behind staying in the Kansai area, and I think it worked out well. But the Kansai area doesn't really have that many it doesn't have that many hard offs. What they have is a couple of super potatoes down in Osaka, but there's another chain that I like called Suragaya Specialty Shop. Now, it's much less common than, say, a hard off, but it's basically an all-purpose like nerd store. It'll sell like anime stuff and figurines and toys and video games and movies and all that kind of stuff. So I really only cared about the video game section. For something that's that well curated as like this is a video game section that's also like a special store, it's surprisingly not that bad price-wise. It's not as good as a hard off where you find stuff there, but it's also not astronomically expensive like it would be at, say, a super potato. So most of the stuff came from these Suragaya specialty shops, only for that reason. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get started with the pickups. Now, the first pickups are actually a postscript to the previous time I went to Japan. If you guys saw that video, there was a little bit of a tragedy in there, which was I went to a store that clearly I was like the only tourist who had ever been to that store, because they were totally ill-prepared for when I asked for the whole tax-free thing. If you're not familiar, as a tourist, you don't really have to pay shipping, or sorry, you don't have to pay tax a lot of the time when buying stuff in Japan. Just look for this logo. And if you see that, it means that if you spend 5,000 yen or more, 5,000 yen being about $47 US, around there, depending on the exchange rate, around that, then you don't have to pay sales tax. And sales tax in Japan now is 10%. So that's a good chunk of savings. But anyway, I found this one store where they did that, but they also, it was so rare for them that they weren't familiar with the process, and they're sitting there going through books trying to figure out like what they're supposed to do. But because of that, they got kind of flustered and they forgot to actually put the discs in the case. And I didn't notice that, and they didn't notice that, and I didn't notice it until I got back to Chicago, which was sad. But I contacted a buddy of mine who lives out there, and he called them up and told them what happened, and they shipped him the discs. So I saw him on this trip, he gave me the discs, and now the games are reunited. So those games were, for the Neo Geo CD, Fighter's History Dynamite, which is just a fighting game, as well as Real Bout 2, The Newcomers, also again for Neo Geo CD, again a fighting game. So cool to complete those, or basically reunite them, as I said. And then the other one that was really a tragedy at the time, but has again been sorted out, this is a game for the Bandai Playdia. I forget the name. I think it's like Chogutsen Selections. I'll put the actual name right there because I don't remember it offhand. Yeah, for the Bandai Playdia. of all consoles. Like Bandai Playdia is an obscure console made only in Japan by Bandai. Did not do well. It was intended for children type of thing. Not impressive. And this was the first time I'd ever seen a game for it. So I was like, oh, I have to get that. And then to have the discs not show up was sad. But anyway, we've worked that out since. So there you go. I have a Bandai Playdia game. Now we can move on to the new stuff. So as you can imagine, one of the things based on what you just saw there that I really wanted to get was a lot of Neo Geo CD stuff. Now Neo Geo CD is a cool console to collect for because frankly there's not that many games for it. I think it swells around like 88 games. Like it's not a huge number. Yet there are some that are like impossibly expensive. I've seen a bunch of them in specialty shops and things like that and Super Potatoes and whatever, but they're prohibitively expensive. But the majority of the games are very reasonably priced. There's something about Neo Geo stuff, like the Japanese, even though they're the ones who have the most of it, they don't really care about it. It's mostly tourists who buy it, myself being one of them. While the Neo Geo CD did come out here, I mean, it barely came out. I don't think I've ever seen the American version. I've seen a handful of the games, but in Japan, I'm not going to sit there and say that it's common, but it's a lot less expensive and it's a lot easier to find. So I end up basically just like, hey, if it's a reasonably priced game, I'm just going to go for it. So here's the stuff I ended up getting. Riding Hero. I have absolutely no idea. I'll put the subtitle there because I don't remember. The Super Spy. Power Spikes 2. League Bowling. Stakes Winner GI something. It's like a horse racing game. Or at least horse betting game. For some reason, these are like super popular in Japan. Some sort of Mahjong Story. Okay. Puzzle Bobble. The Battle of Destiny, which I forget. I think this is like King of Fighters versus Real Bout, Fatal Fury or something like that. It's like a more formal name. Rally Chase. World Heroes 2 Jet. I have absolutely no idea. So I'll put the subtitle there. Something 2. I don't remember what this one is either. I want to say Art of Fighting 2. Gan something or other. Sorry, I don't speak Japanese in case it wasn't obvious. And Neo Geo CD Special. Entertainment CD-ROM. I don't really know what this is. Some sort of promotional disc, I would imagine. But either way, I know I've seen that around. So yeah, it was cool to pick up a lot more Neo Geo CD stuff. Because it is a fun console to collect for. Only because of its oddballness. And the fact that, to be honest, most of the games on the console are actually good and are actually playable. Even if you don't speak Japanese. Because most of the time it's a fighting game. Or something that's just as playable as a fighting game. Even though I'm not very good at fighting games. But yeah, it's cool to have that. Now, another console that I really wanted to collect stuff for if I saw it, which I was stunned to find anything for it, although it's vastly less playable, is I actually found some other Bandai Playdia games. I wasn't expecting that, but here's what they are. Some sort of Dragon Ball Z game, some other Dragon Ball Z game, and some sort of Sailor Moon game. Now, it's interesting to note that these games actually all come in the same type of case, which is completely different than the other game I've got over here. And I think that has to do with the fact that this, while seems to be the standard Bandai Playdia game case, has a manual, it has some artwork in it, there's some little girl who's holding a Bandai Playdia, so I guess this is another console for little girls, which is not really surprising. And then, of course, it holds the disc back there and has like a foam insert. But I think this is only for in the event of the game having one disc. Where this thing, this one, only has 2 discs. One of them appears to be the game, and the other appears to be, I think, just a music CD, as if this game needed some sort of soundtrack. To be honest, I'm not entirely certain, but I think that's why this one would have this kind of a completely different and more standard case, as opposed to these, which are definitely more child-friendly CD cases, because like these are definitely like big bulky plastic cases that little kids can handle. So whatever. Either way, cool, because when I eventually do some sort of video on the Bandai Playdia, there'll be more material for it. So that's good. Moving on. This one was a little surprised to find anything for. I actually found a new Dreamcast, not game, but disc. This is basically a demo disc for a game called Sentimental Graffiti 2. Specifically, this one is based on Rubica. Yamamoto, I think that's what it is. I can't read the full thing because it's obscured by her arm. But yeah, so basically all I really know about this game is I have the actual game. I have a full Dreamcast game set, so it's kind of rare for me to be able to find new Dreamcast stuff. This game, however, had a bunch of individual like demo discs based on each one of the characters in the game. I since found one of them on one of these trips, and now I found another one. Not that it's some major goal to find them all, but considering the Dreamcast stuff is usually in junk bins over there, it was like, oh, all right, I'll totally put down for that. It's a new disc for me. So there you go. Very cool. Then I got some PS1 games. The first PS1 game I got was actually the first thing I picked up on this trip. When I got in when I landed in Tokyo, I took as I've recommended to other people, I took the Kaikyo bus line down to Yokohama, then took a train from Yokohama over to my hotel, and then I spent one night there because the next day I was going to go out to Kyoto from there. But that one night I had there, I was like, oh, let me look around the area and see if there's anything interesting. And there was a book off nearby the hotel, and I was like, what the hell, let's go over there. And I walk inside, and I just looking around the games. It wasn't anything really that impressive, and I'm just kind of thumbing through PS1 stuff, and I see this game called Kowloon's Gate. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. First of all, for a few reasons. One, Kowloon is, or was, a section of Hong Kong known as the Walled City. Now, I've never been there, because a lot of people haven't been there, because it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Kowloon in of itself might exist. I'm honestly not sure. But the Walled City thing no longer exists. So that's kind of fascinating for one reason. Second reason is Kowloon, if you're a Shenmue fan, hey, who knew I was one? But I am. And it's a significant part of Shenmue too. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool even more. Like, it's just kind of fitting with that. But then I went on to notice more about this game. The game was actually only 400 yen, which is like $3.50, but the case is cracked in the front here, which to me was like, whatever, that's no big deal. But there was actually a sticker on it. I had my buddy translate it, and he said, oh yeah, that means it's half off. So it was actually 200 yen, which is like $1.90. I was like, I'll pay $1.90 for this, just for the weirdness factor. But that would have been enough. But I actually did some research on this game. Looking at the back of it, it looked a lot like some sort of like Resident Evil clone. I was like, oh, that could be potentially interesting. And reading more and more about it online, it turns out this is like one of the most demanded sequels that does not exist in Japan. Much the way like, hey, where's my Shenmue 3? Where's my Half-Life 3? Like the games that we're kind of, complaining about. Apparently there's a big contingent of people in Japan who are looking for the sequel to this game that does not exist. So I was like, there might be something to that. And for less than $2, I'm willing to pull the trigger on that. And this actually got even better. So we have to dive into some touristy footage here. But the Kowloon's Walled City no longer exists. But for a brief time, there was this thing in Japan, like this building, that tried to replicate it. And I've got footage here that I can show you. And this is just kind of, it was meant to mask, or not mask, but like simulate that whole area in Hong Kong. And it's really very neat. However, like I said, the original Walled City no longer exists. And the reason you're seeing this footage is my buddy convinced me, let's go over there because this building will cease to exist at the end of November. So at the time I'm recording this, this does not exist anymore. They tore this down. They shut it down and tore it down, which is sad. It's kind of interesting. I did a little looking into it. It turns out anytime anybody wanted to like simulate the Walled City for like a movie or whatever, like, they would use this location because it was a pre-made set basically. Which is very neat. I know a lot of it has a lot of Shenmue vibes to it, of course, because a large part of Shenmue 2 takes place in an area that looks just like this. So it was just kind of interesting, and there's probably really no meaning behind any of this. It's all coincidental, but it was kind of interesting to find this game and then turn around and like go to that place on a trip that was primarily about Shenmue, and at the same time that building was no longer going to exist anymore. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that footage. I'm sorry you can't actually go to see that place anymore, but it was pretty neat. And it also had a lot of weird stuff in it, just like arcade hardware by Yu Suzuki, so like Outrun and all that kind of stuff. It was just the vibes, man, the vibes. But yeah, so I got that. The other thing I got for the PS1 was a game I'd actually really wanted to find, and I could not find anywhere. Highly recommended. This is a game called Gunner's Heaven. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this game, because this is on a lot of people's like, hey, you need to import this game list. This is an early PS1 game that's super playable in English, because the Japanese element of it is basically irrelevant. This is essentially a pseudo-sequel, a spiritual successor to Gunstar Heroes for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. It even uses like basically a very similar name and similar font. I believe it was the same dev team and everything. But it was on PlayStation. It had nothing to do with Saturn. I don't know why, because it seems like that would have made more sense, but maybe there was some sort of damaged relationship with Sega. I don't know. But either way, this is a really cool game. And Gunstar Heroes did eventually get a sequel on Game Boy Advance, but this game was supposedly like the actual sequel, and I played a good chunk of this. This is a really fun game, like really, really fun. Like run and gun, shooting game, like a lot of fun. Highly recommended. Not even that expensive of a game either. The problem is finding it. It was not an easy game to find. I could really only find it in, you know, stores like Super Potato, which I would not do. I would not buy it there, but I did see it there. However, one of the Surgai specialty shops had it, and it wasn't bad, especially compared to online. So I was like, yep, I'm definitely pulling the trigger on that. So mission accomplished. Boom, got it. Next up, I got some GameCube stuff. The first is nothing special. It's just a memory card. Wouldn't have normally bothered, but I've got a lot of GameCubes and I got a lot of GameCube games, so it doesn't hurt to have more memory cards. But really, the reason I got this was that I forget where I was. I think it was a hard off actually, and I was like getting some stuff together, and I needed to cross that 5,000 yen threshold. Otherwise, I would have to pay tax, and the things I had were all like cheap and weren't making it. So I just grabbed like the cheapest thing I could because the total came out to something comical like pre-tax. It was like 4,920 or something. Like I needed something small, so it's like 100 yen or something like this thing. So I was like, all right, cool. Like let me put that in there, and then I'll cross the tax threshold. Then I get the tax off. So it's actually cheaper to grab this than to not grab it, if that makes any sense. But yeah, there you go. Cool. But really, what I was looking for GameCube is more games. Duh. I've expressed this in the past. One of my goals, GameCube to me is a console where I want to collect most of its stuff. It's not a console where I want a full set. I want a full set minus everything that ever existed on the original Xbox. So if a game came out on GameCube, but also came out on Xbox, then I don't need the GameCube version. But if a game came out and it also came on like PlayStation 2 or it came out on Dreamcast, I still want the GameCube version. Now, I do not have a complete set of GameCube stuff in any region. But I'm very close to the Japanese stuff, actually, because Japanese GameCube games are actually, for the most part, really cheap. So on this trip, I went into it being like, I think I need like 5, and then I'm done. So I ended up finding all 5 of them, but I only bought 2 of them. I'll show you the 2 I bought. First one up was Pool Edge, which is not a rare game. It is not an expensive game. I just had simply never seen it anywhere. It was one of those games where it's like, oh, why would we even bother carrying that? Because what idiot would want to buy this? But Pool Edge is, it's just a billiards game. There's nothing special about it, but never got the chance to buy it until this trip, so was happy to pick it up. The other one was kind of cool because the case was so unique. And I might have seen this in the past and not even known it was a GameCube game. This is a game called the Tower of Druaga. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is actually a Famicom game originally. In fact, the artwork style is meant to replicate the original Famicom box. But this is a GameCube game, like disc and everything. Like this is basically the Famicom game ported over to the GameCube for some reason. I don't know why, and as far as I know, this is the only time they ever did that, where they just did like one individual Famicom game and said, put it on the GameCube. There might be more to it. There's probably more to it that I'm not familiar with, but that's what it is. I probably saw it in the past and just assumed it was a Famicom game and moved on. But on this trip, it was in the right section, I guess. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. I guess that's what that is. Because it had been on my list, but I never knew what to look for. But yeah, Tower of Druaga, or Druaga. Now, the other 3 that I needed, I did end up finding, but I refused to buy them. One was at a Super Potato, and I was like, if it's here, then it's too expensive. Like, I'm sure of that. And then the other 2 were at this store down in Denden Town in Osaka, and I don't remember the names of them. But the problem was, A, they were kind of expensive, which was to be expected. But B, even if I wanted to pay that amount, I couldn't because they only took cash, which is like, okay, bye. Like, I'm not interested. And they also didn't do the tax-free thing. So it's like, I'll wait. I'm not in any giant rush. So yeah, it was nice to chip away at the GameCube set, though. Another game I got for a console I never get stuff for, and this was kind of surprising. This is a game called Boundary Gate. Now, okay, so this game is for a console called the PCFX, which actually is a Japanese-only console. It was the successor to the PC Engine, or as we know it, the TurboGrafx 16. TurboGrafx 16, as great as it was, did not perform well in North America or in Europe, so they never bothered releasing the successor console, the PCFX, here. Now, as awesome and successful as PC Engine was in Japan, PCFX was not. It was mostly like this weird anime, almost hentai console where it basically just had a lot of like, the Sega CD just had a lot of like FMV games. It was that and mostly just like anime specific, but in a lot of cases like straight up hentai. So finding actual like playable games on that console, extremely uncommon. Boundary Gate happens to actually be one. Now, as someone who doesn't speak Japanese, my grasp of how to actually play this would be limited. From what I understand, it's something of like a dungeon crawler type of thing with RPG elements and a lot of text. Like, I'm not going to really be able to play this, but it's a game. You know what I mean? It's something that one could play with enough like interest, as opposed to essentially being like a hentai box. So yeah, that's a thing. Also, this game did have versions on other consoles. I saw it for the PS1, and in hindsight, I wish I had bought it, because that would have been nice to maybe do some sort of comparison video, like, hey, this is what the PCFX maybe could have done versus what the PS1 does, you know, like that type of thing, because it was a contemporary rival. Granted, PlayStation 1 destroyed the PCFX in all regards, but still, it was pretty cool, the idea that maybe we could have done a comparison, but I don't know, I just didn't quite think of that. I don't know if there was a Saturn version, there probably was, but either way, yes, I have the PCFX version, so maybe in the future I will get the other version so that we can do some sort of comparison, who knows. But either way, I've got it for that. Now, another game I got that was definitely on the obscure side, which won't sound obscure, but I'll explain. This is a game called Final Blow. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, it's just a boxing game, whatever. This is a game for the FM Towns Marty. Now, the FM Towns Marty, I'm sure a lot of you have never heard of, because, to be honest with you, I've only seen one once, ever. And that's my buddy, Bob Friedel, who actually owns one. And he's the only person I know who does. I've never seen one in Japan. I've never seen one anywhere. If you're not familiar at all with it, it was a console that came out in Japan only. It did not do well. Its biggest, you know, like legacy is that it's actually the first 5th generation game console, like the first. But never, other than Bob, I've never known anyone to own one. On my previous trip, I ended up finding a controller for it for the first time ever, and I bought the controller. I was like, I have to have this, so piece it together, it's fine. And then this time is the only time I've ever seen a game for it. So I was like, oh, boom, need a game, boom, got it. It wasn't even expensive, too. That was the great part. It was just like, oh, good, a game. So I'm piecing it together. Hopefully one day I can actually find the console, but yeah, there you go. I got a game for the FM Towns Marty. Then I got this really weird game, and this was something that was on my list for a long time, and I've seen it before. It wasn't hard to find. It was always either prohibitively expensive or it just came down to space. It's this giant book-looking thing, but this is actually a game. This is actually a game for the Sega Saturn. This is, I forget its Japanese name, Yuki something or other, the Perpetual Collection. You would think if I was so excited about it, I would know the name, right? And to be fair, that's a legitimate criticism. But, you know, I can't read Japanese, sorry. But why do I care about this? Why would I want this? This 5-disc game is the, oh, it's written inside, Yukyu Gensokyoku. Okay, I'm sorry, my Japanese is terrible. Whatever, it starts with a Y. Yeah, it's the thing that this game is known for is this was actually the last Sega Saturn game ever released. This actually came out in 2000, which is 2 years after the Dreamcast had launched in Japan. So it was kind of surprising that a Saturn game came out that late. That's the only reason I wanted it, was just, hey, this is the last Sega Saturn game ever. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is the last official release. So for that reason, I got it. Now, is it playable to me? No. I'm pretty sure this is like nothing more than a date sim, like a big one, because it's 5 discs. But that said, hey, you know, I wanted it for that reason. And it was cheap, too, because big stuff like this is never expensive in Japan because it takes up too much space. Now, you've probably noticed there's a Sega Saturn sitting here as we get towards the end of the table. You probably look at it and go, oh, cool, you have a Model 1 Sega Saturn, whatever, the gray one. No, I have one of those. This is actually special. I ended up finding this at one of the stores, and I was like blown away by it, because this is actually a Viktor V-Saturn Model 1. It's in great condition. Basically, it also came with the original Model 1 controller, too. So what's the deal with this? Basically, and I don't know the full story behind this, but you have to understand, despite what we typically think of the Saturn as being like this bomb, it was actually the most popular console Sega ever had in Japan. It was actually stupid successful there. It was the only place where it was successful, which actually is partially what caused a lot of Sega's problems in the 90s, because they couldn't decide like which divisions mattered the most, and none of them were exactly equal to each other, and it doesn't matter. But yeah, so because of that, and I'm just speculating here, I think what happened was the Saturn itself had so many chips in it. It was so hard to build. There was a lot of demand for it at the same time, and Sega could only keep up to a certain extent. So they licensed out the Saturn basically to other electronics companies, one of which was a company called Viktor, who's still around, and they still make stuff. And they made their own version of the Saturn, which is essentially the Sega Saturn. It's not really any different. It's cosmetically different, and then internally it has a different BIOS. Beyond that, I'm not entirely certain if it has like different chipsets or what, but it'll read all Japanese Saturn games, and you know, the boot cart, it'll read American and European games as well. But yeah, it's fundamentally just a Sega Saturn that looks different and technically has a different BIOS and things like that. But it is known as the Viktor model RGJX1. Now, like I said, there is actually a Model 2. I have the Model 2 as well. This one was cool because I found it in this store in the box. Oh yes, I have the box for this thing too. And it was, I mean, the box has seen better days, but it's still cool to actually have the box for it. Now what was interesting is I was looking through this store and they had a whole bunch of boxed consoles. And when I saw that, I was really surprised. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Because I kind of wanted like, I have a V-Saturn. I didn't know they had actually done 2 versions of it until I pulled the box just to look at it. And I noticed, wow, this is a Model 1 V-Saturn. That's really cool. And I was like, it's too bad it's got to be like really expensive. And then I saw the price tag, which was like the equivalency of, it was like, what, 120,000 yen, which would be like basically $110 or so. And I was like, I don't really feel like paying 110 bucks for this thing. But there was also this other sticker that was like 50% off. So I was like, is that the 50% off price, or is it 50% off of this price? So, you know, I basically Google translated that question, brought it up to the counter and asked, and she said, she drew out the total and she said it was 6,000 yen, which is like $58. And I was like, yeah, all right. That's a deal. I could do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Because it, you know, that's a pretty good deal. Even if it was just the console. But it came with the original controller and it came with the box. That's crazy. So I was happy to do that. I don't have to pay shipping or tax or any of that type of stuff on it. So, and it works perfectly. It's in great shape. So definitely a cool pickup to have. But it doesn't end there. Now, as I mentioned, I did go to some hard-offs. Now, I didn't have as much luck with hard-off this time, again, because I had just been there. But one thing I did find that was really cool, and I decided to save it, because sometimes you have to save some of this stuff, because you have to understand, hard off has this bad tendency, if something sits around there too long, they're like, okay, nobody wants this, and they just trash it. And some stuff, you know, like, yeah, that sucks, but some stuff is like, it's too rare and too special to trash, and this was in that pile. A Core Graphics PC Engine CD-ROM System 2 with the interface unit was in the junk bin. This is pretty special. Like, if you guys saw, I did a video on this thing sort of last year where I did a Japanese pickups video, and I found, my buddy Fox actually found something very similar to this, and he let me buy it because it was cheap and he didn't really want it, he just liked finding it. There's actually a plastic lid that's supposed to go with this. This version did not come with it. The previous one I have still has the lid. But basically, what you have here is an interface unit. My previous one, that's just over there, it has a gray like side. This part's black, and I think it's because it actually came specifically with the PC Engine Core Graphics model, which is this black version of the PC Engine. And then it comes with the CD-ROM System 2. And this one actually came with the boot cart, specifically the system card version 2.1. This is necessary in order to get the CD-ROM system to even attempt to read a disc. Now, so it was just this thing, and they said it didn't work, which wasn't really surprising. But basically the reason they considered it junk and it didn't work is because it didn't have a power supply. What's annoying about these things is you look on the side, it's just got standard composite output, and it has what looks like a very standard power jack, but it turns out it's not. It's actually a very specific size and voltage. So you have to buy a proprietary device just to power this thing. Now, I already bought one last year for the other one, and I tested it out, and the thing works. The interface unit itself works perfectly. The core graphics works perfectly. The CD-ROM System 2 does not. It boots up, it recognizes that it is what it is, it recognizes the card, it tries to read a disc, but the disc unit itself never spins anything, which is very common. Both of mine do not read discs. Nothing I have that reads PC Engine CDs actually reads discs. They all need maintenance. But it was cheap, and it needed to be saved. And the cool thing is, I didn't realize this, but when I got back, you know, I was like, I thought I actually had the Core Graphics model, this black, gray PC Engine. I have the Core Graphics Model 2. This is the Core Graphics Model 1. I thought I had this, but really until right before recording this video, I didn't know that. I went and checked and I was like, oh crap, I didn't have this. So technically I got like a free core graphics with this thing when really all I wanted was the interface unit. So this is like a nice little bonus. I was like, oh cool, another console. And it came with the boot cart. So yeah, pretty happy with that as an overall pickup. I think that was very neat. Like I said, it does need maintenance, but the core graphics part and all that stuff, that part works perfectly. It's just needs a new lens, but that's also doable. So one day I'll get all these damn things to work. Now, you would think this would be where we would be at our end, but no. I did find one other thing that was very special. So special, in fact, the first time I saw it, I went, no. Not doing that. Not doing that. And I left the store and I took the train and I went from Osaka all the way back to Kyoto, where I went to bed, or I was about to go to bed, and I was telling my friends as they were waking up here, like, hey, here's all the stuff I got, and isn't that cool? And like, here's some of the stuff I saw. And one of my friends was like, you saw that? Did you buy that? And I was like, no. And he's like, why? I was like, cause man, I think I spent a bunch of money on stuff and like, do I really need that thing? And he was just like, you know, he was like pissed off at me a little bit. He was like, come on, man. He's like, he looks at the eBay prices. He's like, what are you doing? Why would you not buy that? So basically my friend guilt tripped me into going back there and all the way down back from Kyoto to Osaka to get this damn thing, which would not have been worth it except I had a JR pass. Side note, JR passes are, there's a bunch of Japanese train systems. JR is one specific company, Japan Railroad. You can, as a tourist, buy what's known as a JR pass that lets you, for the amount of duration in which the pass is valid, never have to pay for trains. You just kind of wave it at them and they just let you through. But that's only worth it if you have to take the Shinkansen, which is the thing you would take from like the bullet train from like Tokyo to Kansai area and back, because each one of those like routes is like $150 one way. The JR pass is like $300, so it's only worth it if you do that, because then after that, you can use it for all the local stuff and never have to pay for it. Aside from those specific situations, JR pass is not worth it, but in that situation it is. So, so I was like, okay, cool, let me take my JR pass and ride back down to Osaka and go get this damn thing that he guilt tripped me into getting. So when you see this, dude, I'm judging you. This is all you. You made me do this. But here we go. I got the Hitachi Saturn Model 2. This is very similar to situation to the V-Saturn. Once again, Sega licensed out the Saturn to various people and companies. Hitachi was one of those companies. This one is in beautiful condition. Like, I swear this thing must have just been in a closet for 20 years and never touched. No box, unfortunately. It does have the controller, which is nice, the original Hitachi controller. And the controller's in great shape too. I don't think anybody ever really used this thing. But yeah, it's very, very nice. The boot up intro on this thing is different as well. It's very cool. And I think all that really happened with this was that, you know, they made 3 of these. They made the Model 1 based on this design with the ovals. Don't have that. This is the Model 2. And then there's actually a third one that's like a GPS unit. I'll show you some footage of it here. This I don't have. I know one person that has this thing. But it's crazy uncommon. I've never seen one for sale. But the Hitachi Saturn, yeah, I now own a Hitachi Saturn. It's in hindsight, I'm glad I did it, because the story, it was true. It was cheaper than it would have been online. I didn't have to pay shipping. I didn't have to pay tax. You know, the exchange rate was in my favor, all that stuff. So that was never going to find a Hitachi Saturn for less money, but still it was one of those things like, nah. But at the same time, I ended up getting a lot less stuff on this trip, so I kind of mentally justify it to myself that way. But yeah, man, the Hitachi Saturn. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there being like, did you really need these 2 Saturns? Like, what do they do? Do they play games differently? No. they're just cool things, which I like to collect cool stuff. What can I say? But, and to preserve it, because while this one was in a store where they knew what it was, so they weren't going to destroy it, things like the V-Saturn would have eventually been trashed. And that, the PC Engines combo there definitely would have been destroyed at some point. So, I don't know, there's that part of me that's just like history preservationist, is like, I don't want to see that stuff get trashed. But in this case, this is just full-on guilty pleasure. Like, I just wanted this damn thing. But, very cool. It's actually kind of funny now, because I think I actually have more versions of the Saturn than I do of the Dreamcast. I'm not totally sure about that, but there's a lot of variations of the Saturn because of Japan and how many weird ones they made. Whereas the Dreamcast, while they did make a bunch of different colors, and I only have a few of them, but still, very cool. So anyway, that'll about do it for, actually that definitely will do it. That is the end of the video. So thank you very much, guys. If you could like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, I appreciate it. I want to thank very much my buddy Fox for, you know, helping me out there. I also want to thank a guy named Brian in Guam because he, when I was down there, he made my life a hell of a lot easier by being able to drive me around and stuff. So appreciate you, dude. Thank you to my buddy Switch, who helped me out in Japan as well. He's the guy who helped fix this situation with the games over here. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.